You've joined program number 2 of The Wiccan and the Pastor. I'm Thea Bristlebroom, and I'm be speaking today with Kent Philpott. Kent, I have always wanted to know ever since I met you, how did you get such a lovely wife? How did you meet her? She's very talented,
Oh, she
but
is. Yeah, we like to say she's the brains of the outfit, makes this work, with
and she
all.
has such a lovely singing voice too. When I came to
Oh,
your church,
she
I
sings.
really enjoyed that.
Yeah, she sings very well. She does indeed. Yeah, Jewish background. Became a Christian, 20 years ago or so. And we've been married for 12 years. And we both have interesting backgrounds. I'm not as pure as the wind-driven snow.
What fun would that be?
So anyway, that's Katie, and we enjoy doing the television work, and we live in a little house in Santa Benicia, eastern end of San Rafael, California, and love it here. And garden, you talked about gardening last program. I got my seeds. In fact, we're lots of
Tell
gardening.
me a little bit about what keeps you doing this, because you have a very storied, long-lived job there. I don't know exactly how you would refer to it, but you've been the pastor at that church for a long time. And so tell me what keeps you going?
Well, um, first of all, let me back up a little, Thea,
Sure.
uh, and explain. Um, in my growing up, I became a Christian when I was 21 years old. I was in the military. I wanted nothing to do with Christianity. I remember when my dad put me on the train in Los Angeles to go to Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, San Antonio area. He gave me a New Testament. My dad became a Christian when he was 15 years old. And myself and my two brothers, my mother never became a Christian. My nearest brother, Bruce, never became a Christian. My youngest brother, Gary, did. But I threw the New Testament away as soon as I got on the train. And so I wanted nothing to do with it. Actually, I was interested in Edgar Casey
Mm-hmm.
and Bridie Murphy. Ever heard of Bridie
Mm-hmm.
Murphy?
Yep.
And UFOs. I was interested in that stuff. I never got involved in any group. I just read the books. I was more fascinated with that. And Christianity was something that sort of, I didn't like it. I was a bit of an idiot. By the time I was 15 years old, I had 2 felony convictions on my record, and I got a call from my recruiter, military recruiter, and he said, "Philpott, you didn't tell me about your record." I said, "I forgot." I forgot. And he got it expunged for me, and I got in. They were anxious to get people. So I spent 6 years, but 4 years active as a medic with the Air Force. And right in the middle of it, I became a Christian. My wife went to a church. She was a Christian, wanted me to go to a church, but I refused. I was in a philosophy of religion class at UC Davis because I worked as a medic with Second Casualty Staging Flight. We moved all the wounded from the Pacific Theater, and so I worked at night. I went to school in the daytime, and Professor Child, renowned philosopher, professor, we had to write a story about a religion. I said, okay, I'll pick Christianity. I know all about that. Well, I had to plagiarize everything, had to go to a library and steal so I could pass that class. And, but in the process, I went to a church with my wife 3 or 4 times. And I went forward and said the sinner's prayer with Sergeant Al Becker. And I was pronounced a Christian in this Baptist church.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that I wasn't. 9 months later, and I was a member of the church and everything, 9 months later, all of a sudden, in a way that I don't know what happened, I became a Christian. I was actually what you say experienced a new birth.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. I was by myself. Bam. And I was going to be a school psychologist. I was doing a master's in psychology at Sacramento State. And all of a sudden, I wanted to go into the ministry. So I applied to Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary in Mill Valley, California. It's now down in Ontario, Southern California.
My question was, I think we've wandered a little far afield. Let me rein you back in. My question was, what keeps you going now? Because you've had all this time under your belt.
I felt called to the ministry. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. We will refer to it just in those terms, Thea, as a calling.
Yes.
And nothing else will do it for you. That it's just something that you want to do. You have the sense that God has called me into this work. And for people like Baptists who, there's a high casualty rate of the people that go into the ministry, and because it doesn't give you any kind of job security of that at all. You're just on your own pretty much. Mm-hmm. And so I pastored a little church when I was in seminary. And then the big thing that happened to me in regard to what kept me going, I was going to seminary and pastoring this little church in Byron, California, 75 miles from Mill Valley.
Yep, I know where that is.
You know where it is? Okay, Thea. Yeah. Well, I used to drive by Martinez where you live.
Yep, exactly.
I used to drive Highway 4.
Yep.
Yeah, Martinez, Pittsburgh, Antioch, Brentwood, Byron, yeah. And but it was February of 1967. Here's the whole thing, Thea, that I think answers your question. I'm trying to answer your question. I just got off work at J.C. Penney's. I sold shoes at night to survive because I was married, had 2 kids, yep. 2 kids. And I was listening to Scott McKenzie's song, "When You Come to San Francisco, Wear a Flower in Your Hair." Well, I had been a beatnik. I had been a beatnik in Los Angeles, Hollywood, Sunset Strip, Cosmo Alley, Pandora's Box. I lived that life. I was a Jack Kerouac on the road guy. Traveled around. I would take off with no money in my pocket, nothing. I just go and return a couple months later. I was this kind of crazy guy that lived that beat life. So I'm listening to Scott McKenzie in the car, Thea, and all of a sudden it comes to me, these words: "Go to the hippies in San Francisco." That was a Wednesday night. The next night, Thursday night, after I got off work, was rainy night in February. This is February 1967. I went to the Haight-Ashbury. Nobody was there. I was dressed in some of my old military clothes. So I looked sort of funny in that environment. I didn't look like a hippie. And then I met a guy who was the chief devotee of the Hare Krishna Temple on Frederick Street, right off of Stanton, right by where the 49ers played football. And I ended up leading a Bible study in the basement of the temple after the kirtan. That's the the Hare Krishna worship thing, and Swami Bhaktivedanta, the guy that started Hare Krishna, he gave me permission to do it. I had to meet with him, and he passed on me for some reason. I'm sure if he had to do over again, he would have said, "Get out of here." So I ended up being a street preacher in the Haight-Ashbury for 3.5 years. And it all went, I went through hell, frankly.
Yeah.
A divorce. It was a very difficult life, but I was kind of a street smart, tough kid, and I was able to deal with it. And but that was it. God literally called me to go to the hippies in the Haight-Ashbury, and so I did. And just one thing led to another. Moved to San Rafael, California. You know, I was living in the city. I lived in a rescue mission. I was homeless. I lived in behind the pulpit of a street church on Balboa Street between 41st and 42nd. It's now an Egyptian cuisine restaurant. I visited it not too long ago. And so we was part of the Jesus People movement. Now, this is important. Have you ever heard of the Jesus People movement, Thea?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. There have been 4 what do you call awakenings in America. There's going on all over the world all of the time. There's been thousands of them, but this was the latest. This was the 4th one that came to America. Started in '67, ended in '72. Some people say it's 1975. Where you had hundreds of thousands of people, almost always young people in the hippie movement, but not all together, who suddenly became Christians. Then I was thoroughly involved and started a church which became the largest evangelical church in Marin County. Very interesting way we got involved in on the outreach to people in the gay scene. Because of my background in psychology and my degrees, I had a counseling center, the Marin Christian Counseling Center, that I ran for 10 years, all through the '70s. And one week, 3 guys made appointments with me. They didn't know each other, and they all said exactly the same thing to me. I didn't even know what homosexuality was. They said, "Look, I'm gay and I'm a Christian. I don't want to be gay anymore." And so later on, I asked the lady who kept the appointment book, I said, "Do you have contact numbers with these guys?" They did. I brought them together. We started meeting together. They brought 3 lesbian ladies. And we formed a ministry called Love in Action. And the church that I pastored, let's say 375 people on a Sunday morning, about 200 of them were gay, ex-gays, etc. So I wrote a couple books on it and the stories of those people. And that was a major event in my life. And to a lot of ways, I'm still very much engaged. When I did a doctorate at a Presbyterian seminary, we talked about Presbyterian, last program. And so I did a doctorate, and my thesis was that the guys, all the people in the Love in Action, they wanted me to do this. It was called a marriage manual for former homosexuals. And you know how when they give out doctor's degrees, they read the thesis, and when they read off the title of my thesis, everybody laughed and what? But anyway, so that has been a big part of my ministry. Now have a pretty growing ministry to transgender people. And I have a number of transgender friends. And another transgender friend I'm going to be with this coming Saturday, going to be interviewing him. He was at MTF, and I'm going to be introducing him. And so I have 2 books on transgenderism. The new one, brand new, is called In the Wrong Body. And God gave me a love for transgender people. And God gave me a love a long time ago for people involved in the gay scene. And I just have always been attracted to these people and the suffering that they go through. I understand it. So I love to outreach to these people, particularly the transgender group, which is growing by leaps and bounds. So that's a big part of what we do. But I did go through a divorce. I am not accepted by a lot of people because I've been through 2 divorces. One divorce, well, you can think, well, 2. So in 1978, my major professor, Dr. Lou Rambo, who was a nationally acclaimed expert on cults and conversion. And I had to meet with him every week for like 8 months out of the year. We became good friends. In one of our meetings in 78, we'd already been together for 2 years in the program, the Collegium. He said, the church you pastor is cultic. You're a cult. I'd been told the same thing by 2 seminary professors at Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary, and I dismissed what they said to me. And so the next week I brought Dr. Rambo our statement of faith, Thea, and he said, oh, your theology is perfectly Christian. It's perfectly okay. You're okay. He says it's not your theology, it's the way you look at other people. You're wrong, I'm right. And 2 years later, after I actually graduated with my doctorate, that I was in a crisis because of the cultic mentality. I find myself isolated. We had churches from Sonoma to San Jose, and I was the head of it all. And we thought we were more spiritually enlightened than other people. We knew better. We were moving and grooving in the spirit, Thea. And it was a cultic mentality, and later it became something I wrote on. I conducted cult recovery support group for 6 years, which we're starting up again. I just did 17 videos that my son is using to reach out to people caught up in those Christian-oriented cults. But anyway, so that gives you a little bit. The church I'm pastor of is very small. As a matter of fact, can I say this? You were
Sure.
there.
I was there.
Yeah. You, Thea, walked in the door about a little over a month ago.
Yep.
And we went to the fellowship hall, and I just thought so much of you for coming and doing that. I was so surprised.
Well, it's one of those things that I think we share in common. Finding people very interesting and enjoying good conversations. And I find religion fascinating, all kinds of religion, but also just the ideas about archaeology and what does that tell us about what's in the Bibles, what's in the holy books of Islam, their Quran. There we go. I knew I'd find that word. It's very fascinating to me to get that history, and then it's also fascinating to me to talk to people, and I see that same light go on in your eyes, and we go, oh, good, a juicy conversation.
Yeah, and you know, there's nothing more important, you know, that if something's going to capture you, the whole thing about God and so on is so important. One thing I want to make sure I say here, and we've got we got about 6.5 minutes, is that we're not political. I don't let people know who I vote for, and I don't get behind any politician or any political party. I just refuse to do it because I think a lot of times danger lurks there, and I think recent events have demonstrated that pretty adequately. I do consider myself to be conservative and progressive at the same time.
Small c, small p.
That's right. Yeah. I was.
I find it interesting, your use of the word cult there. Can you, I think it varies a little bit from what mine is. Could you maybe give me an explanation what a cult is, in your opinion?
Okay, it's just the word cult, cult. There's a certain kind of cults where you let's say in Christianity, where you break away. There's a number of these large groups. You have new improved truth. You have a new book that gets dictated. I'm not going to mention groups, but there's some very, very influential groups that have churches all over the place, but they depart from the core Christian theology, having to do with God as the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, adding to the main point here is that salvation is in their group. You have to be a part of our group. Mainline Christianity points to Jesus alone. Jesus is the Savior, and nobody else is, no organization, and there's no magic that can turn you into this. It's not magical in that, well, if you get baptized, if you do this and you do that and you do this, that sort of magical idea that this makes you a Christian, we would consider that to be extra biblical.
So are you saying that only schisms from Christianity are cults, or can you have a cult in another that isn't related?
So you have the major divisions of people leaving, say we've got the truth, we have new revelation. That would be a Christian cults. Now, you can find the term cult being applied to all kinds of groups. There are political cults, there are economic cults, there are psychological, educational cults. Cults come in 4 forms: religious, psychological, therapeutic, economic, and political.
So how would you tell if something was a religion versus a cult? What's the difference?
Okay, you can have a cult that's religious. For example, now what we've been seeing in the recent times here, the various white supremacy cults. They're political. They have the truth. They know better than anybody else. They've got the real truth. So it can morph into any kinds of things.
So I've encountered a concept when I was a seeker and early on in my pagan days, called one right, true, and only wayism.
Really?
And yeah, and I think it's something similar to what we're talking about, or what you're talking about with cults, in the sense that any group that says we are the one, the right, the correct, the only way to God, But you're also saying you could have that in terms of these other categories as well, political and other things.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much, because I wasn't quite tracking on that.
This is one of my major areas of study, have been the cultic mentality and how that develops, because it happened to me personally.
Yeah.
It led to a divorce. It led to my resigning of this church. I still have people from that day going back. I resigned in 1980. That today that still is troublesome and causes me some grief. Once you go through and have been trapped in the cultic mentality, it just stays with you in lesser and lesser degrees, but it's potent. Now, let me just say real quick. I got a couple things real quick. I have a Reformed theology. That means I don't consider myself a Calvinist, but Reformed, and many people will know what that is. And when it comes to, let's say, Wicca, a Wiccan would refer to me as a narrow Christian. A narrow Christian. In other words, we do, as a, let's say, biblically oriented Christian, I would look at Wicca and I would say, I wouldn't use the term cult. I wouldn't use the term cult. Wicca doesn't fit that. But from our perspective, my perspective, it would be in the area of a wrong religion. It would, in other words, I would not be accepting. Now, I accept you, Thea, because I like you. I consider you a friend. But, and you know, you're not embracing my theology, I'm not embracing yours.
And we're not pretending to embrace, you know, we're being honest with each other. And
that's exactly right.
Upfront about the fact that we have differences in our theology and in our practice. But I think we could both say that we're both good people. You know, I certainly wouldn't kick you out of my house if you showed up uninvited. You know, I would invite you in. I would be comfortable breaking bread with you.
Thank you, Thea. I enjoy this. Well, we've come to the end of our second program, and we're going to figure out in coming up what our next ones are going to look like, Thea. So anyway, thank you. And be looking for more programs called The Wiccan and the Pastor. So long.